Neal Darken Trellis walks into Sluice, orders a juice, and adjusts the noose he's wearing. Do you always start interviews this way? I ask as we shake hands. He laughs, the first of many, explaining the noose as a joke, the darkest of humor, insisting this should tell me everything I need to know. I don't see him again for 3 days. When he reappears, Trellis stumbles over clutching a gin and tonic, his expression unreadable. Somewhere between sheepish or wolfish at a guess. Are you that guy? He asks, meaning am I the guy sent to interview him for the Prescient? The magazine that tries to predict which currently noteworthy prick will project all their pain and damage onto the world next. Do you want to be interviewed? I ask. While the author considers his response, I decide to fill you in on who he is if you've never heard of him and don't massively care. Neal Darken Trellis became notorious in the early 90s for writing books. He would compose with a pen and paper before typing it onto a computer and posting the manuscript to a publishing house keen to make money by pressing the pages into a book. His career began with a game-changing short story, Ball Game, in which Grange, a freshman at State University, tries to decide which of his balls releases the most jazz, the left or the right. He masturbates to climax 3 times while listening to the super cool music he references throughout the text, and is murdered by his roommate, who hates him because he's been doing shit like this all year. Novel. A novel followed and was noted, but it was the controversial publication of Water, Maze, Hops in 1992, which really announced him as a man who had written a book. The story followed Hose, a sophomore in college, who convinced he's Rudolf Hess, the once prominent Nazi, flies to Scotland in a wig and tries to open a golf club. Turned down by every potential funder and mocked for the bad wig, Hose gets a bus to an English market town and starts telling everyone he's Scottish. A year later, his father calls and says, "It's June. I just noticed you didn't come home at Christmas. You're not dead, are you?" Hose splits for Sweden to start a pop career, getting as far as walking into a packed bar in a leather jacket and sunglasses before crying hysterically when no one pays him any attention. 4 million sales and a year of sex and drugs followed for all at Peyton E. Parasite Publishers, with director Roos Tolbooth in particular living out every sexual fantasy he'd ever had or thought of, even all the unlikely teenage ones he thought would remain unrealized forever, to the point he attempted to check in for a flight home after 6 full days of sex and couldn't remember his own name and had to be told to check his passport if he wanted to find out what it was. Tolbooth later released his own memoir of that time, a podcast consisting solely of calls he'd recorded himself, making to Trellis demanding he write another best-selling book because he'd fucking got a taste for it now and fucking loved the revolving sexual circus. Having watched Parasite take 90% of the money from a book he'd written and created, Trellis announced he would write his next on parchment and auction a single copy to the highest bidder. Burger Club told the story of Brad, a check-shirt patriot living in a log cabin in New Hampshire who predicts the future will basically be videos of people opening boxes on the internet while their cats rub up against them. Ostracized by a society unable to process his vision, Brad moves to Australia, where he is instantly surrounded by obnoxious twats. The single-copy parchment went to auction in September 1993 and was won by Parasite, who translated it into book form and took 90% of the money again. Did you hear the story about me? Trellis asks, his whole being alive. Some removal guys came to my apartment when I was leaving the city and found a ton of coke. Why aren't you laughing? He asks when I don't share his obvious joy in the story. I just find cokeheads boring, my reply. Sorry. This is interesting to me, Trellis responds. Your reaction is interesting. Because I'm a writer. It's a very subjective thing. A reader not liking my work is not a problem, but let me tell you, my new book is different, and a lot of readers will immediately recognize that. What's it about? Trellis inhales deeply for the dive to come. The new novel, out in the fall, is called Listless, and it's a story led by a protagonist also called Neal Darken Trellis, a sort of fictionalized version of me. It's kind of set the summer he leaves college, and he's hanging out in diners. He's hanging out in bars and country clubs, fucking everything that moves. Doing a ton of blow, but none of it is enjoyable to him. All it offers is escape. From his anxieties, his thoughts, his overwhelm. He takes a drink, he takes blow, he hangs out in bars, his conversations go round in circles. The same words, the same themes. Like he's plunging into a pool underwater, and the anxiety, the triggers, the outside world can't reach him. He's numb, frozen. Nothing moves forward, and he has no idea he's drowning. You're left wondering how much of this is true, how much has been fictionalized, how much of all this is someone else's fault entirely. I don't care, I tell him. This is you writing to yourself about yourself with a few pop culture references thrown in. This isn't a story. I don't care how fictionalized it is. Let's go up to my suite, do some blow. Maybe you can calm down. Feel better, Trellis says, picking up his drink. The lift of Venus flytrap. We enter his suite in near darkness. The scene unfolds around me. A guy fucking a guy as he fucks a woman, bent studiously over a table, all wearing skis and ski goggles, lit by purple light, shouting random words in French. Je dois rechercher tous les jours. None of this is happening, Trellis says, gaslighting me immediately. Lounging on a sofa, beginning a monologue, I hid myself a long time. I zone out. My life a blur of motorways, hotels, trains? Is this what death is? I created my life. Trellis sniffs. His nose a hoover as three bald men interview each other on a couch in the corner about an REM album they played no part in, all dressed identical, green slacks, yellow t-shirts, their different sized ears the only clue. The writer looks at me, starts narrating my life, recasting me as a character he calls Dandruff Bobby. Stylistically, it's more interesting to me, he explains. Pulling on a pubic hair bathrobe as super cool music plays. Inventing a journey where I'm born on a train in Scotland. By the time I arrive in London, I have psychologically assessed my parents and decided I have no choice but to endure it till I'm 18. He flicks on the TV, compilated porn bloopers. Some guy can't get through the dialogue with the girl about the pizza. Someone farts loudly, dispersing the gangbang. The guy asks the girl if she's loving what he's doing. She breaks character, says no, not really. I sip iced water, try to hydrate as Trellis orders room service. A sandwich, no filling. Just bread as Dandruff Bobby quits writing age 40 and sets the world hash brown record, and at 3:41 a.m., the fucking over. The bald guy's slurring into microphones over a 3-chord backing track. Trellis orders 50 oranges on room service and throws them one by one out of the window. I suffer a terrifying mental collapse. I see it coming. It feels inevitable. Anything to make this stop.